Have you ever noticed that in the most stressful moments, the world doesn't just hand you problems, it floods you with alarms? Notifications blink like emergency lights, voices rise, each insisting they are the one you must respond to now. Even your own mind joins in, whispering worst-case scenarios that grow louder with every heartbeat. Stress in our time isn't just about the challenge in front of you. It's the weight of 100 false emergencies dragging at your attention. In an age where urgency can be manufactured with a single ping, the real danger is not the fire you must put out, but the ones that are lit simply to pull you into someone else's chaos. I've learned that intelligent people, those who hold their ground when the air gets thick, do something most others don't. They refuse to let stress dictate their movements. They don't match panic with panic. They slow their breathing. They enter what I call the inner command room, a place inside where stillness is not absence, it's camouflage. From there, they can see the whole field before moving a single piece. This isn't about pretending the storm isn't real. It's about refusing to let the storm decide who you become in it. Because under pressure, most people leak their energy without knowing. They jump from one demand to the next, their mental bandwidth stolen by every red exclamation mark. They mistake motion for control, when in truth, they're being pulled like a marionette by the loudest string. The Stoics saw this long before our devices learned to mimic urgency. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." In other words, the outside world can only grip you by the handle you give it. In stressful times, intelligent people keep those handles hidden. They choose their responses with the same precision a surgeon uses in the operating room. Steady hands, clear eyes, no wasted cuts. And they understand something subtle. When they can't read you, they can't use you. This calm isn't natural, it's cultivated. It's a skill that comes from knowing exactly what to avoid when the pressure is high. Because stress will tempt you to prove yourself, to react instantly, to fill silence with explanations, to abandon your own needs for the comfort of others. And each of these temptations feels justified in the moment, but leaves you weaker afterward. In this video, we'll uncover 10 specific things intelligent people avoid during stressful times. 10 subtle traps that pull most people deeper into the fire, and the quiet, deliberate ways to step around them. Some of these will surprise you, some will feel uncomfortably familiar, and all of them will show you that surviving stress isn't about being stronger than the storm, it's about being still enough to see the path through it. So take a breath. Step into your own inner command room. Let's begin. When pressure hits, most people aren't just dealing with the problem in front of them. They're absorbing the panic of everyone around them. That's why the first trap is what I call urgency contagion. You get an email stamped urgent and your pulse jumps. Someone calls you mid-lunch, voice pitched high with drama, and you feel you must drop everything to respond. Often what they want isn't truly critical, but the atmosphere of hurry, their siren-like tone, slips into your nervous system like an invisible virus. In the digital age, where a single push notification can cross continents in an instant, urgency can be mass-produced. The problem is, your brain reacts to the signal of urgency almost automatically, like hearing a fire alarm even when you can't see the smoke. Wisdom begins when you disrupt that reflex. I once worked under a manager for whom every day was a situation. Every request had to be done right now. They lived as if everything was burning, and my job was to be a firefighter on permanent call. At first, I played along. I answered messages during dinner. I stayed up late to finish tasks that could have waited until morning, but slowly, I realized I wasn't accomplishing more. I was just running hotter. The thing being worn down wasn't my schedule, it was the sharpness of my mind. Marcus Aurelius advised, "If you seek tranquility, do less, or do what's essential, and do it with clarity. This isn't a call to shirk responsibility. It's an invitation to be deliberate about where you spend your energy. When stress runs high, intelligent people create a buffer, a deliberate pause between stimulus and response. That pause is unpredictable power. It lets you see whether the fire is real or just smoke someone's blowing in your direction. I began asking myself one question before acting. Is this truly urgent, or is it just the loudest thing right now? That single filter separated the essential from the noise. Many so-called emergencies dissolved on their own when I didn't feed them with instant compliance. Some people were frustrated that I no longer responded at once, but over time, others began to respect the boundary. Psychology shows that urgency hijacks your decision-making by triggering survival mode. Your brain wants to end the tension fast, but in doing so, it often bypasses long-term judgment. Intelligent people understand that calm is not slowness, it's the ability to respond with strategy. They are willing to let someone wait if needed. They guard the rhythm of their own life instead of moving to the beat of chaos. They don't rush to every knock on the door, because not every knock is an opportunity. Sometimes it's just an invitation to walk into someone else's storm. Avoiding urgency contagion isn't about being cold. It's about retaining sovereignty over your attention. Once you stop treating every signal like a fire alarm, you begin to hear the one voice worth acting on, your own. There's a hidden tax on your energy that doesn't come from what is happening, but from what you think might happen next. This is the trap of catastrophic forecasting, turning uncertainty into a full-length disaster movie in your mind. One unanswered message becomes a sign your relationship is falling apart. A meeting rescheduled turns into proof your job is on the line. You're not reacting to reality. You're reacting to a script you've written, directed, and acted in without realizing it. And in stressful times, this trap grows teeth. Your brain, primed for threat, tries to prepare you by imagining the worst, but ends up keeping you in a constant state of fight or flight. I've been there, lying awake at night, my mind looping through scenarios that grew darker with each replay. What started as a single worry would spiral into a chain reaction. If this happens, then that will happen, and then everything will collapse. The irony is that almost none of it ever came true. But my body didn't know that. It responded to every imagined scene as if it were happening right now. Heart racing, breath shallow, focus fractured. That's the cruelty of catastrophic forecasting. You suffer twice, once in imagination and once, maybe in reality. Seneca captured it perfectly. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. The Stoics didn't say to ignore the future. They said to strip it of its theatrics, to see possibilities but not crown them as certainties. Intelligent people learn to break the cycle by catching the mind in the act. The moment they feel the narrative spiraling, they pause and label it. This is a forecast, not a fact. That subtle reframe reclaims the gap between what could happen and what is happening. I remember coaching someone who was convinced their boss was preparing to fire them. They'd interpreted every neutral email as a coded message, every pause in conversation as disapproval. It had consumed weeks of their mental bandwidth. Eventually, they asked for a direct meeting and learned the signs they'd been tracking were nothing more than scheduling delays. The cost wasn't losing the job. The cost was losing peace for weeks over a story that never existed. Psychologically, catastrophic forecasting thrives in high-pressure moments because the brain mistakes prediction for protection. It thinks that if it can see every bad outcome in advance, you'll be safer. But more often, it leaves you paralyzed, reacting to shadows instead of substance. Intelligent people flip that script. They apply what I call the mental fog exchange, trading imagined chaos for present clarity. They ask, what do I know for certain right now? What's the smallest next action that's grounded in fact, not fear? Sometimes the bravest move is to stop running simulations and return to the single step in front of you. Because when you strip away the imagined wreckage, you realize most of the future you feared was just a clever mirage. Avoiding catastrophic forecasting isn't about blind optimism, it's about disciplined perception. It's refusing to pay the emotional bill for disasters you haven't even been billed for. And in that refusal, you recover the one thing stress tries hardest to steal: the ability to see this moment exactly as it is and act from it. There's a kind of exhaustion that no amount of sleep can fix, the kind that comes from overdosing on information. In stressful times, it's tempting to believe that if you just keep scrolling, keep refreshing, keep checking every update, you'll somehow regain control. But doom scrolling is not control. It's sedation disguised as awareness. You're not soothing your mind, you're flooding it. Every headline, every opinion thread, every flashing update is like another pebble tossed into already troubled waters, distorting whatever clarity you might have had. I've seen it in myself. A difficult day would push me to reach for my phone, telling myself I just wanted to check the news. 20 minutes later, I'd be knee-deep in comment sections, absorbing outrage that wasn't mine, letting other people's storms pour into my own. By the end, nothing in my life had changed, but everything inside me felt heavier, more agitated, less capable of thinking straight. That's the trap. It feels like you're gathering useful intelligence, but really you're caught in what I call the dopamine compliance loop. Every swipe and click delivers a tiny jolt, teaching your brain to crave the next hit of what's happening now, even if what's happening has nothing to do with you. Marcus Aurelius didn't live in a world of push notifications, but his words cut through time. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Doom scrolling flips that truth on its head. It gives outside events power over your mind, minute by minute, swipe by swipe. Intelligent people, especially under pressure, break this loop with what I call the attention bypass protocol. They set strict entry points for information, 2 or 3 specific windows a day for checking updates, and the rest of the time, the gates are closed. It's not ignorance, it's intentional filtering. I once worked with someone who kept live news streams running in the background just to stay informed. But instead of staying informed, they stayed inflamed. The constant drip of anxiety-laced updates kept their nervous system in a permanent low-level alarm. Once they committed to cutting the feed, checking news only in set intervals, their mood leveled, their focus returned, and the urgency they'd been marinating in lost its grip. Psychologically, information overload hijacks the brain's executive function, the part responsible for prioritizing and problem-solving. The more noise you feed it, the less it can tell signal from static. Intelligent people protect that function like a sacred asset. They curate what they consume the way a professional athlete curates their training. Only what strengthens the performance is allowed in. Avoiding information bloat during stressful times isn't about disconnecting from reality. It's about staying connected to the reality that matters most, the one you're living in, not the one endlessly broadcast through a glowing screen. Because clarity doesn't come from knowing everything, it comes from knowing enough, and then putting your full presence where it can actually make a difference. When you stop feeding the loop, you realize the world will keep turning without your constant surveillance, and you'll have reclaimed something rarer than information: your mental sovereignty. When life is calm, decisions feel like stepping stones. You choose one, then the next, with room to breathe between each step. But under stress, those stones pile into a frantic staircase you feel forced to sprint up without stopping. This is decision stacking, making too many choices, too quickly, while your mental resources are already strained. It often begins innocently. A crisis appears, you handle the first decision, then another one arrives, and before you realize it, you've taken on 10 unrelated choices in a single emotional state. The trouble is, your brain doesn't reset between them. It carries the tension of the last decision into the next, clouding judgment and magnifying mistakes. I've lived this cycle. During a particularly turbulent month, I found myself deciding on urgent work deadlines, personal commitments, financial adjustments, and even minor household purchases all in the same day. By evening, I wasn't making thoughtful decisions anymore. I was making escape decisions, choices designed to get the discomfort over with, rather than to create the best outcome. That's the danger of decision stacking. It doesn't just exhaust you, it erodes the quality of every choice you make. Epictetus taught, "No great thing is created suddenly." Intelligent people apply this truth to decision-making, especially under pressure. They practice deliberate deceleration, intentionally slowing the pace of decisions, even when urgency whispers otherwise. They separate high-impact decisions from low-impact ones and delay anything that doesn't require an immediate answer. This isn't procrastination, it's triage for the mind. One executive I coached kept a decision parking lot during stressful quarters. Any choice that wasn't time-sensitive went into the lot, reviewed only once a week. This single habit reduced reactive errors and freed mental bandwidth for the truly critical calls. It also revealed how many urgent decisions lost their urgency when given a little time. Psychologically, decision fatigue is well documented. Each choice you make depletes your willpower reserves, making subsequent decisions more impulsive. Under stress, this fatigue arrives faster, and the consequences ripple wider. Intelligent people treat their decision-making capacity like a finite resource. They batch similar decisions together, schedule important choices for peak mental hours, and guard against mixing emotional decisions with strategic ones. Avoiding decision stacking is about protecting the architecture of your thinking. It's stepping off the runaway staircase and returning to the rhythm of one solid step at a time. Because in high-pressure moments, the quality of your next move will rarely be improved by adding 5 more moves before you've even caught your breath. When the heat is on, many people slip into what I call emotional performance, broadcasting their feelings in a way that's meant less to process them and more to manage how others see them. It's the nervous laughter in a tense meeting, the overly dramatic sigh on a phone call, the curated tone in a group chat designed to signal just how burdened or wrong you are. On the surface, it can seem harmless, even human, but under stress, it becomes a leak. Every ounce of energy spent performing emotion is energy stolen from actually resolving the moment. I've fallen into this trap myself. During a high-stakes project meltdown, I caught myself telling multiple people the same exaggerated version of how everything was falling apart. I wasn't trying to lie. It was a subconscious attempt to rally sympathy and make sure everyone knew how hard I was working. The reality? The more I performed my stress, the less capable I was of quietly untangling the actual problem. The performance fed my anxiety instead of calming it. Marcus Aurelius offered a sharper compass. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. Intelligent people apply the same logic to emotions. Stop showing what you feel as proof of authenticity and start aligning actions with what the moment requires. They understand that silence is not emotional dishonesty, it's emotional discipline. I once worked with a manager whose team respected her most in crisis because she didn't wear her feelings on her sleeve. It wasn't that she was cold. She acknowledged her emotions privately, processed them, and only communicated what was necessary to keep the team focused. While others vented, she directed. While others tried to signal their stress, she conserved hers like a battery. Her authority grew not from hiding her humanity, but from mastering its expression. Psychologically, emotional performance is often a bid for validation or control. It's a way to influence perception when you feel powerless over events. But in high-pressure situations, it backfires, making you look reactive, fragile, or self-absorbed. Intelligent people replace performance with precision. They ask, what is the minimum my emotions need to say here so my actions can speak louder? They channel the surplus into private reflection, journaling, or trusted one-on-one conversations, not public displays. Avoiding emotional performance isn't about becoming robotic. It's about creating a stable emotional climate that others can trust when the storm is loud. In stressful times, your feelings can be real without becoming public theater. And when you remove the performance, you stop rehearsing your pain and start rehearsing your solutions. There's a certain itch that appears in stressful times, the urge to justify every move, prove your worth, and over-explain your reasoning to anyone watching. It's a survival instinct wired into the human need for acceptance. But under pressure, it becomes a sinkhole for energy. Every explanation you pile on is time and focus stolen from actually doing the work. And the more you try to prove yourself, the more you signal that your value is in question. I've made this mistake. During a turbulent business negotiation, I found myself sending long, carefully worded emails defending my every choice, anticipating objections that hadn't even been voiced. I told myself I was being thorough. In truth, I was performing insecurity. Each paragraph I wrote was a silent plea. Please see that I'm competent. The irony: the more I explained, the less confident I appeared. Seneca's reminder cuts deep here. The greatest remedy for anger is delay. I'd add, the greatest remedy for insecurity is restraint. Intelligent people know that in high-pressure moments, credibility is built in action, not in explanation. They resist the impulse to flood the room with words and instead let their choices demonstrate their competence. I once observed a senior strategist in a board meeting where her plan was questioned. She didn't launch into a 5-minute defense. She simply restated the key point, explained the one piece of evidence that mattered, and moved on. The result? Her brevity made her sound certain, unshaken, and in control. The discussion shifted from her competence to the merits of the plan itself, which is where the focus belonged. Psychologically, over-explaining often stems from a fear of misinterpretation or rejection. But trying to preempt every doubt actually creates more opportunities for people to question you. It's like playing verbal chess against yourself, moving pieces no one else was going to touch. Intelligent people trade this for what I call proof through pattern, consistently delivering on promises, speaking with economy, and letting results serve as the most persuasive argument. Avoiding the need to prove yourself doesn't mean being silent in the face of challenges. It means answering the question asked, no more, no less, and recognizing that dignity often lives in the unsaid. In stressful times, your worth isn't established by the length of your explanation. It's reinforced by the steadiness of your presence and the clarity of your next move. Stress has a way of making your personal boundaries feel negotiable. You tell yourself it's just this once when you answer a late-night message, or they really need me when you cancel your own rest to meet someone else's request. But each small concession chips away at the invisible fence that protects your time, your energy, and your clarity. In stressful times, boundary erosion doesn't usually happen in a single dramatic breach. It seeps in like water through a hairline crack. I learned this the hard way during a period when my workload doubled overnight. I started saying yes to every request from colleagues, friends, and family, telling myself it was temporary. Weeks later, I was depleted, irritable, and strangely less effective at everything. The truth was simple but uncomfortable. By letting others redraw my boundaries without resistance, I had quietly abandoned my own priorities. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Intelligent people apply this by guarding their boundaries most fiercely when stress is high. They know that when your reserves are low, every intrusion takes more than it seems. One broken hour of rest can cost an entire day's focus. I once consulted for a team leader who implemented what she called the crisis perimeter during high-pressure projects. She limited her availability to 2 check-ins per day, refused last-minute meeting requests, and blocked off non-negotiable recovery time each evening. At first, some colleagues resisted, but within a month, they learned to respect her time. And more importantly, she delivered consistent, high-quality results despite the chaos. Psychologically, stress tricks you into thinking flexibility equals strength, when in reality, clarity is strength. Boundary erosion often comes from guilt or the desire to be indispensable, but both are dangerous in the long term. Intelligent people replace guilt with precision. They decide in advance which exceptions they will make and which they won't, and they communicate those lines clearly. Avoiding boundary erosion in stressful times is not selfish. It's strategic. It's how you preserve the mental and emotional scaffolding that holds you up when the weight increases. Because when you keep your fence intact, you don't just protect your peace, you protect your capacity to keep showing up where you matter most. In stressful times, silence can be your sharpest tool, yet the pull to speak too soon can be overwhelming. Reactive commentary, the instinct to weigh in immediately on every new development, feels like control in the moment, but it's often just noise. It's the rapid-fire message in a group chat, the instant reply to an email you barely read, the heated opinion shared before you've had time to test its truth. In crisis mode, this kind of impulsive speech doesn't just risk being wrong, it can magnify chaos. I've fallen into this trap in fast-moving situations, firing off responses to prove I was engaged and on top of things. Once, during a project crisis, I sent a pointed comment to a stakeholder thread without fact-checking. It took less than an hour for new information to surface that contradicted my words. My credibility didn't just take a hit, it made others more hesitant to involve me in critical discussions until I rebuilt that trust. Epictetus would have recognized the danger. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. Intelligent people embody this in high-pressure moments, resisting the temptation to fill silence with speculation. They understand that in times of stress, the first comment can set the tone for everything that follows, and a misstep early can take days to repair. I once worked alongside a crisis communications lead who had a remarkable habit. She waited. When an urgent update came in, she listened, asked clarifying questions, and gave herself a strict buffer, sometimes 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, before making any public or internal statement. Her restraint not only reduced errors, but also made her words carry more weight. When she finally spoke, people leaned in, knowing she had thought it through. Psychologically, reactive commentary often springs from anxiety or the need to assert relevance. But true influence doesn't come from constant input. It comes from deliberate, precise input. Intelligent people ask themselves, does this need to be said right now? And am I the right person to say it? More often than not, the answer to one or both questions is no. Avoiding reactive commentary in stressful times is less about withholding your voice and more about preserving its impact. When you speak only after clarity has arrived, you replace noise with signal. And in a storm, signal is what everyone is straining to hear. When the pressure mounts, the first thing many people abandon is their body's basic upkeep. Sleep is cut short, meals are skipped or replaced with whatever's fastest, movement is sacrificed in the name of more urgent work. In the short term, it feels like you're trading comfort for productivity. In reality, you're eroding the foundation that allows you to function at all. Neglecting physical protocols during stressful times is like trying to fight a fire while disabling the sprinklers. You're working harder while quietly removing your capacity to succeed. I've made this error more than once. In the middle of a critical deadline, I started sleeping only 4 hours a night, telling myself it was temporary. Within a week, my focus was fractured, my patience thin, and my decision-making erratic. I wasn't just tired, I was less intelligent in real time, making choices that created more work instead of solving problems. Stress had convinced me my mind could run without its fuel, but the body will always send the bill. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The body should be treated more rigorously, that it may not be disobedient to the mind." Intelligent people invert the usual crisis logic. They double down on physical discipline when stress is high. They treat rest, nutrition, and movement not as luxuries, but as tactical assets, because a clear head and steady energy are rare currencies in chaos. I once consulted for a startup founder in the middle of a funding sprint. While his peers boasted about working 18-hour days, he guarded his morning workout, ate real meals, and enforced a lights-out time even during peak negotiations. He closed the deal not because he outworked everyone, but because he stayed sharper and more persuasive when others were visibly burning out. Psychologically, neglecting the body during stress often comes from a belief that the mind is the primary battlefield. But the mind is not separate. It's an organ inside a system. Starve the system, and the mind becomes your first casualty. Intelligent people understand that discipline over the body is discipline over the mind itself. Avoiding this mistake means holding the line on your non-negotiables: enough sleep to reset, nutrition that sustains, and movement that circulates energy. In stressful times, your body is not in the way of the work. It is the instrument of the work. And when you protect it, you don't just survive the storm, you keep the power to navigate it. In high-stress moments, logic often takes a backseat to adrenaline. Emotional gambling is what happens when you start making bets with your well-being, your relationships, or your reputation, driven not by strategy, but by a desperate need for relief or victory. It's snapping at a colleague because you hope it will reset the dynamic. It's making a risky purchase or commitment just to feel in control of something. In the moment, these moves feel bold. In hindsight, they're often expensive lessons. I've done this myself, more than I'd like to admit. Years ago, after a major project setback, I tried to salvage my confidence by forcing a hasty pivot, committing to an unrealistic deadline in front of the entire team. I thought I was showing leadership. What I actually did was trap us in a timeline that was doomed from the start, creating more stress for everyone. I wasn't betting on a sound plan. I was betting on an emotional high to distract me from the pressure. Seneca warned, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Emotional gambling thrives in that gap between fear and fact, where the urge to do something, anything, overrides the discipline to wait, watch, and choose wisely. Intelligent people recognize that in times of stress, every decision carries compounded risk. They know that impulsive choices can escalate problems from difficult to irreversible. I once worked with a senior negotiator who had a strict personal rule: no big commitments within 24 hours of receiving bad news. Whether it was a contract change, a staffing issue, or a personal setback, she let the first wave of emotion pass before deciding on her next move. Her restraint wasn't passivity, it was a calculated guardrail. It prevented her from making emotional bets that could undermine months of progress. Psychologically, emotional gambling is the stress brain's attempt to buy certainty in an uncertain moment. The wager is that a single move will fix the discomfort, but more often it drains the very resources, trust, credibility, stamina, you need to recover. Intelligent people swap this pattern for what I call emotional auditing, checking whether the action is a real investment or just a flashy bet against their own long-term stability. Avoiding emotional gambling doesn't mean avoiding risk. It means taking risks that are informed, deliberate, and aligned with your larger strategy. Because in stressful times, the smartest play is not the one that feels thrilling in the moment, but the one that keeps you in the game long enough to win. Stressful times have a way of convincing you that the rules don't apply, that urgency justifies shortcuts, that exhaustion is proof of effort, that bending your principles just this once is harmless. But over the past 10 segments, we've seen the truth. The moments when life presses hardest are the very moments when your discipline matters most. Every intelligent choice you make under pressure is a vote for the kind of person you remain when the storm passes. Stoicism teaches that you can't always control what happens, but you can always control how you respond. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And in stressful times, your estimate is shaped by the habits you keep or the ones you allow to slip. Avoiding urgency contagion, resisting catastrophic forecasting, stepping back from the endless scroll, holding your ground against decision overload, refusing to perform your emotions, letting go of the need to over-explain, defending your boundaries, staying silent until clarity comes, protecting your physical protocols, and steering clear of emotional gambling. These are not small acts. They are acts of self-preservation that quietly multiply your capacity to endure. I've been through seasons where I failed at most of these. I've also been through seasons where I honored them. The difference was night and day. In the first case, stress hollowed me out until I had nothing left to give. In the second, I walked through the same storms but emerged not just intact, but sharper, calmer, and more respected than before. Think of these 10 practices as a survival lattice, a set of interlocking supports that hold you steady when everything else feels unsteady. The more faithfully you keep them, the more unshakable you become, not because the stress goes away, but because it stops having the power to dictate who you are. So the next time you find yourself in the middle of a high-pressure moment, pause. Remember that every choice you make is either reinforcing your stability or trading it away for temporary relief. Choose the moves that keep your mind clear, your values intact, and your energy focused on what truly matters. Because the real victory in stressful times isn't just getting through, it's getting through without losing yourself. If this message spoke to you, if it gave you a moment of clarity in the middle of your own storm, don't let it end here. Share it with someone who's facing their own high-pressure season. You never know whose day you might steady with a reminder like this. I also want to hear from you. Which of these 10 practices is the hardest for you to keep when stress is high? Is it the pull to respond immediately? The temptation to overwork your body? Or maybe the urge to make an emotional bet just to feel in control? Leave a comment and share your perspective. You might discover you're not as alone in the struggle as you think. If you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who values inner discipline and mental clarity. That's what this channel is all about. So if you haven't yet, subscribe and turn on notifications. We explore Stoic wisdom not as dusty philosophy, but as a living toolkit for modern life, especially in the moments when life doesn't give you the luxury of calm. And if you want to take this further, I've linked another video in the description that pairs perfectly with this one. It's about how intelligent people protect their peace in a noisy world. Watch it next and start building the habits that will carry you through not just this season, but every one that follows. Because storms will come, but with the right mindset, they don't get to decide who you become.